My name is Laura Boyle. I'm the host of the Ready for Polyamory podcast, and I'm here to share a few sort of fun facts about polyamory. Polyamory, of course, is the subsection of consensual non monogamy that is sort of more focused on romantic and loving relationships as opposed to sort of sexual or kind of friends with benefits style relationships, although plenty of polyamorous people kind of blend both into their larger relationship networks. So, some of these kind of fun facts. As of 2021, and studies that have been released to the public and were published on CBS News this year, there are more people who identify as consensually non monogamous in the United States than identify as LGBTQ. Between 4 and 5% of US adults identify as being currently in consensually non monogamous relationships. So that's a really huge percentage of the population. I know it sounds tiny, but like compared to what people perceive or think, or the way my dad goes, maybe in 25 years we're gonna feel like the parents of gay kids in the 70s. Like, it's really kind of a big deal, you guys. There's a lot of us, and it's sort of ever growing. Then, also, some other fun facts. Of course, the word polyamory comes from the Greek poly, meaning many, and the Latin amory, meaning love. So, many loves, that's how we get polyamory. If we wanted to change it up, we could be all Greek and be like polyagapis, which would be loving everyone, or polyphilis, meaning sort of a deep friendship love, or we could be polyludus and be really into playful love. But basically, the Greek words are a little bit too specific, and the Latin one generically means love, just like in English, there's a generic word for love. So we mixed our roots and are making the classicists clutch their pearls. Some other fun facts about polyamory: it was first published, the word polyamory, in 1990 in an article by Morning Glory Zell, Morning Glory Zell Ravenheart, who is a writer and member of Oberon Zell Ravenheart's church, which was a sort of communal living, intentional community from the late 70s through the late 90s that wrote a lot of material that was very sort of inspirational to early polyamorous communities. Although back then people were still figuring out what to call themselves, so there was a lot of calling it open relationships, calling it group family raising, calling it polyfidelitis relationships, because the idea was that you would form closed units and then stay very loyal to one another. So fidelis is the Latin for loyal. So that was the term that was sort of duking it out with polyamory for about a decade beforehand, before polyamory made it into print and people went, that sounds really good. Another fun fact about polyamory is that there are a lot of sort of forms of polyamory that have their own word for them. And I don't mean the like style of it that people practice, because there are a lot of words for that, but that'd be way too long a video. We'll get there another day. But I mean, like, if you're with someone who is with someone else, that's often called a V, because you, your partner, and their partner look like a V. If all three of you are together, you make a triangle, and that's called a triad, or sometimes a throuple, because it's like a couple but with an extra person. I don't particularly like that because it sort of sounds like you're just monogamy plus one. And I think it's nicer to distance ourselves from monogamous language when possible, because part of what polyamory is doing is forcing us to look at the assumptions we make about relationships in a pretty intentional way. And so intentionally looking at our language is part of that. But I'm also kind of obsessed with the semantics because I'm a big nerd. If you're not, feel free to use whichever word you like better for the relationship that you're in. So we've got V's, we've got triads when you're 3 people. When you're 4 people, if you're all kind of involved with each other, you can be a quad, you know, sort of like the things you ride on that have 4 wheels because there's 4 of you. Or if you're not all involved with each other and you've got that V and then you've got one extra person off like this, you look sort of like an N, right? So you can call it an N. You can keep going way out for ages. You can be a W. At some point, things can get complicated because you can get somebody going off in a different direction. Your triad can have somebody else coming off of it. And at that point, we stop naming the shapes. We just call it a polycule. And I don't think it's visible because I've been standing in front of it. But my picture frame says polycule. It's a cute picture of my polycule. And my metamor made it for me and wrote polycule on it, wood burned it in. So, like, it's one of those things. Polycule is a portmanteau of polyamory and molecule because these networks end up looking like constellations or like odd molecules of molecules, which I just pronounced wrong, of really complicated sort of chemical shapes. So I find all of these to be kind of really interesting, dynamic ideas that we build off of in this sort of underlying polyamorous world, right? We've got the idea of, since we can be with more than one person, all of our relationships can then grow in multiple directions and we can have a big interesting network. Even if some of the networks are built out of like intimate friendships rather than relationships that somebody outside of a polyamorous world would define as a relationship. Maybe that's getting a little complicated. I'm gonna talk for hours, guys. I shouldn't. We'll save it for another day. I'll be back. So, polyamory, many loves. There's lots of different sort of subtopics to talk about under polyamory. If you want to look at, or listen to rather, me talking about it at length, I've got the podcast. If you want to see little sort of snippets about it, this channel is going to have lots of little snippets of me and sometimes me and guests talking about polyamory and things we wish we'd known about polyamory before we started, things that we're glad to know about it now, and I hope that you find it useful. But this is my first little video on here just to kind of get the channel started. So thanks, and hopefully I'll see you around. Please subscribe so that we can hit the point where I can actually have a name rather than a giant gobbledygook. I appreciate it so much. Have a great day.